In the lavish glow of his opulent mansion, millionaire Jonathan Sterling feels an all-consuming loneliness. But when his housekeeper's son Alex unexpectedly enters his life, an unthinkable secret awaits, a hidden brotherhood that could shatter Jonathan's reality. Stay tuned for revelations that will change everything he thought he knew. Jonathan's days blended seamlessly into a routine colored by opulence. With each passing hour, he engaged in high-stakes meetings that buzzed with ambition, attended galas filled with beautifully adorned guests, and shared toasts that echoed through the marble halls. Yet, in the midst of the clinking glasses and spirited conversations, loneliness continued to tighten its grip. Until recently, Martha had been a comforting presence who bridged the gap between his lavish existence and the outside world. But her absence marked a stark shift. Now, as Alex took on the role of housekeeper, Jonathan noticed more than just the young man's humble attire. He watched with a mix of curiosity and concern as Alex maneuvered through the sea of bustling staff, navigating unfamiliar waters that seemed both harsh and foreign. The contrast couldn't have been starker. While Jonathan thrived in an environment bursting with luxury, Alex found himself mingling with those who belonged to the periphery of grandeur. Jonathan sensed in Alex a struggle, a contrast of privilege that painted the younger man's reality in shades of muted colors against Jonathan's vibrant hues. The late-night conversations began innocently enough, born from the quiet moments after the gala lights dimmed. They lingered over coffee cups in the dimly lit kitchen, and Jonathan found comfort in Alex's willingness to share snippets of his life. Alex spoke of dreams once nurtured, now overshadowed by the weight of responsibilities that left little room for what could have been. Glimpses of aspirations flickered from his words, buried beneath layers of self-sacrifice. Sometimes, it feels like I am living someone else's dreams, you know? Alex confessed one night, pushing his cup away and leaning back in his seat. There was a tension in the air that made Jonathan's heart ache in solidarity. I have always wanted to travel, to see the world beyond this home, but it just never seemed possible. Jonathan's thoughts raced. How long had it been since he pondered the limitations woven into his own life? You are young, Alex, he offered, his own voice wavering slightly. There is still time for you to pursue those dreams. It is not too late, isn't it? Alex countered quietly, his eyes revealing a deeper sadness. What good are dreams when survival claims all your attention? The words hit home, awakening something within Jonathan that he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and wealth. He realized with a jolt how hollow his engagements felt, compared to the raw honesty shared with Alex. As the young man opened up, Jonathan couldn't help but reflect on his own estranged family dynamics. Memories surfaced, of laughter now lost in silence, of a warmth that had faded amidst his relentless pursuit of success. He recalled childhood moments twisted by neglect, and the emotional walls he had built to guard against further pain. But Alex, in this fragile space they created together, was slowly nudging them down. Intriguing similarities emerged from their conversations, illuminating the outlines of a kinship that was entirely unexpected. Jonathan marveled at the shared feelings of neglect, of yearning for acceptance that seemed to anchor them both. I often wonder if wealth is not just a mask for something else, Jonathan mused one night, the vulnerability creeping into his tone. Maybe it just keeps us from truly connecting with others. Just as these convoluted thoughts began to settle into his mind, an unease lingered beneath the surface. What truths was he hiding from himself? Could it be that Alex's seemingly ordinary life was brimming with complexities that Jonathan had overlooked? It was then, upon returning from one late-night conversation, that Jonathan made his way to the attic, a forgotten part of his home. It was filled with boxes of old memories, dust-kissed artifacts from a time Jonathan had largely ignored. As he sifted through the remnants of his past, a photograph slipped from a box and fluttered to the floor. He picked it up, heart racing as he examined the image. The faces gazing back were distorted by time, yet one stood out, a young boy's face, similar to his own but aged by decades of absence. This photograph, untouched by the chaos of his daily life, felt heavy with significance. Jonathan's breath hitched, and he could not shake the sense that it was a key to understanding something critical about his family ties. Suddenly, the air grew thick with tension, plucking at the threads of curiosity and suspicion that had begun to weave through his mind. What lay behind the smiles in the photograph? As his heart raced, Jonathan felt the contours of a familiar disquiet beginning to surface. Would this image unravel the truth he had so diligently chosen to ignore? The deeper Jonathan delved into his past, the more it hinted at a connection that felt as elusive as it was inevitable, intertwining him and Alex in ways he never anticipated. The mansion felt different during those late nights, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the echoes of Jonathan's growing anxiety. He sat in his dimly lit office, papers strewn across the desk like the wreckage of his once flourishing empire, financial reports, each more disheartening than the last, whispered the grim truth of impending failure. Jonathan stared blankly at the figures, each line prickling at the edges of his sanity. It was a far cry from the confident broker who had once commanded boardrooms with charisma and smugness. Amidst his spiraling thoughts, Alex appeared, a steadying presence who instinctively understood when Jonathan needed comfort. They had forged an unusual camaraderie through shared late-night conversations, each revealing glimpses of their fragmented lives. As dark clouds rolled across the night sky outside, Jonathan found solace in Alex's perspective, one that seemed to emerge from the depths of his experiences rather than the height of privilege. "There is wisdom in moments of silence," Alex said one night, stirring a steaming cup of tea. "Sometimes it is better to listen than to speak. The world has its own way of revealing truths, if you just give it a chance." Jonathan pondered those words, relishing their calming effect amidst the chaos surrounding him. "I envy you, Alex," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You see the world so clearly. I feel lost in it." The admission hung in the air, exposed and raw. As the days passed, however, a gnawing unease grew within Jonathan. He stumbled upon an old family letter while rummaging through the attic in search of distraction. Dust hung thick in the air, like an unsettling whisper of forgotten histories, as he carefully unfolded the fragile paper. The elegant writing on the page hinted at secrets buried long ago, references to a brother he never knew existed. His heart raced, flooded with memories of a stark childhood. Nights spent alone in a sprawling house, the laughter of parents echoing down hallways, now distant. The thought of a sibling, hidden from him, felt like an iron weight settling in his chest. Could this letter possibly connect to Alex? Paranoia slithered in, twisting his perspective into something darker. That night, a fierce thunderstorm raged outside, pounding against the windows with relentless fury. Lightning illuminated the room in sporadic flashes, mirroring the turbulence within him. Jonathan found himself pacing, unable to shake the gnawing feeling that Alex was more than just a housekeeper's son. What if he was entwined in this painful narrative? When Alex entered the room, the rain drumming a chaotic rhythm against the window, Jonathan's heart raced. "Alex," he began, a tremor in his voice betraying the facade he fought to maintain. Do you ever feel like there are hidden stories that shape who we are, things we do not fully understand?" Alex paused, looking keenly at Jonathan. "All the time. I guess it is the shadows of our pasts haunting us. They can influence our choices and our paths without us even realizing it." His expression turned serious, as if he sensed the gravity of Jonathan's thoughts. "That old letter I found, it mentioned a brother." Jonathan's voice cracked, the confession feeling monumental. "What if there is something I never knew? What if your life is tied to my family's secrets?" A flicker of concern crossed Alex's face, but he remained silent, the tension hanging heavily in the space between them. Jonathan searched his eyes, desperate for any remnants of the connection they had begun to forge in their late-night discussions. But now, doubt infected his thoughts, and the thread of trust that had been building wavered. "I cannot ignore the shadows anymore," he continued, his voice rising with emotion. "I have to find the truth, no matter how much it hurts." As thunder rumbled outside, the storm raged not only in the skies, but also within Jonathan, a tempest ready to expose the very foundation of his identity. Would Alex be able to withstand the coming storm of revelation? Or would they both drown in the complexities of their entwined fates? What would this seek out and disrupt in their evolving relationship? Unearthing buried truths that both yearned to uncover. It was a question that loomed ominously as the world outside churned with powerful winds, setting the stage for an inevitable confrontation destined to change everything. The storm howled like a wild beast outside Jonathan's mansion, each gust of wind clawing at the windows, rattling them as if to demand entry. In the confines of his lavish office, the atmosphere felt electrified in more ways than one. Raindrops drummed against the glass, echoing the tumult that raged within him. It was in this chaos that Jonathan uncovered a family archive neglected and buried. At the back of an old drawer, a record that would alter the very foundation of his existence. As he flipped through brittle pages, a name leapt out at him like a specter resurrected from the past. Alex Sterling. The realization crashed over him with a ferocity that rivaled the storm. This wasn't just the name of his housekeeper's son. This was the brother he never knew he had. The world he had carefully constructed around himself shuddered and warped, each memory of isolation and loneliness cascading into a flood of disbelief. His breath caught in his throat, as if the weight of the revelation was physically pressing down on him. Almost instinctively, he looked up, and there stood Alex, drenched from the storm that had carried him into Jonathan's heart in more ways than one. The young man's presence morphed from a simple companionship into a reflection of blood, heritage, and a shared past cloaked in secrecy. "Jonathan," Alex began hesitantly, but the tremor in his voice mirrored Jonathan's internal chaos. I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know how to tell me?" The words slipped past Jonathan's lips, sharper than the cracks of thunder outside. Anger welled within him, swift and raw. "How could you hide this?" "I didn't know," Alex countered, his voice breaking. "You think I would have wanted to keep this from you? You're my brother, and now I'm just a housekeeper's son to you, aren't I?" Anguish flickered in Alex's eyes, battling the anger that was rising like lava within Jonathan. He could see the depth of pain etched into the lines of Alex's brow, a mirror reflecting back his own turmoil. Did the young man feel just as betrayed by the family that had ostracized him? The thought gnawed at Jonathan, twisting his insides with guilt, but also indignation. "I don't understand. Everything I've built, the world I've created, was meant to keep the ghosts at bay." Jonathan spat, pacing the room now, his heart racing, wrestling against the confines of his own spiraling thoughts. The thunder crashed again, as if echoing the internal upheaval of epic proportions. "What about me?" Alex cried out, his composure cracking. "What happens to my life? You think this doesn't affect me? I had my own struggles. Growing up in the shadows, not knowing who I was. The shadows lengthened in the office, the atmosphere charged with accusations and pain." They stood across the polished desk, the gulf between their lives seemingly unbridgeable, yet connected by blood and an irrevocable truth. "Maybe the truth would have been easier for me to accept a long time ago," Jonathan shouted, anguish tightening around his throat. Every word was steeped in sorrow, the deep-seated yearning for an answer to the unrelenting questions that had clawed at him for years, threatening to spill forth. "If I had known, perhaps none of this would have happened." "Are you angry at me for existing?" Alex's voice dropped to a painful whisper, eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I didn't ask for this either, Jonathan. I wanted a relationship. I wanted to know my family. And suddenly we're face to face with ghosts we never could imagined existed. You can't blame me for this." Jonathan felt his resolve wavering under the weight of Alex's words. He knew he was reacting out of fear, fueled by uncertainty of what to do with this revelation. Anger fled, replaced by the fragility of guilt and an overwhelming, bewildering sense of loss. They were brothers disconnected by years of silence, scars that had marred not only their souls, but their identities. His mind raced. The opulence of the mansion around them felt suffocating now, a gilded cage that would no longer protect him from embracing who he truly was. Past memories surged forth, painful recollections of a childhood lacking warmth, longings for the familial love he had thought his wealth could substitute. I can't deal with this right now," he finally declared, stepping back, searching for space as if to breathe freely again. "It's too much, Jonathan," Alex started, desperation creeping into his tone. "No," Jonathan cut him off, staring intently through the rain-streaked windows. Lightning flashed, revealing the ghostly outlines of what could have been, what had been lost. "Do you understand what this means? I have built my life on facades. My identity is tethered to what I thought I knew. And now, it's all falling apart. The intensity of the moment crushed down on them, both grappling for control over their swirling emotions. Jonathan's heart thundered within him as storm clouds gathered outside, mirroring the tempest of discovery raging within. As the rain poured down in sheets, he floundered in this chaotic sea of confusion and budding recognition of brotherhood. But in that split moment, he felt a flicker of something else. A small, quiet hope. It clung desperately amidst the vastness of despair. A faint possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, this revelation might also be a route to healing. As thunder rolled through the air, shaking the mansion to its core, Jonathan was faced with a grim crossroad. Would he push Alex away, forever shrouding their lives in separate griefs? Or would he take a step toward the light, embracing this unforeseen familial bond that illuminated the darker corners of his soul? In that charged silence, he found himself wishfully teetering on the edge of acceptance and rejection. And through the storm's howl, the ultimate question lingered. Could he risk everything he knew to embrace the brother standing before him? The room felt suffocatingly silent. After their confrontation, the air thick with unsaid words and unresolved emotions, Jonathan stumbled through the remnants of his thoughts, his mind a strange labyrinth twisted with fraying threads of confusion and regret. His identity, once comfortably cloaked in the confidence of wealth and success, now lay exposed and broken, locked behind the reality of his family ties. The revelation of Alex as his brother shattered the carefully constructed barriers he had built around his heart, leaving him to question everything about his family, his relationships, and himself. The mansion, which had always felt like a grand fortress, now echoed with the ghosts of his past, memories wrapped in an eerie melancholy. As days rolled into nights, Jonathan found himself increasingly restless, pacing the halls, thoughts spiraling back to the family letter that had triggered this upheaval. He needed to unearth the truth about his family's history, to decipher the choices that had led them here, this tangled mess of privilege, shame, and longing. With a determined sigh, he turned to the study, a place long neglected, filled with dusty tomes and fading photographs that bore witness to a life he struggled to grasp. The musty scent of aged wood mingled with the faintest hint of lost dreams. He lowered himself into the worn leather chair, flipping through countless pages of ledgers and records, each one a piece of a puzzle he was desperate to solve. His father's name appeared time and again, alongside notes that hinted at darker truths. Jonathan's heart raced as he read about the reckless investments, the misfortunes compounded by arrogance, and relationships frayed by betrayal. Each entry peeled back layers of a man he thought he knew. He discovered a name that bore chilling familiarity: Alex's mother. The implications were staggering. An affair long buried beneath the weight of societal acceptance, a connection veiled in secrecy. The legacy of betrayal runs deep, he whispered to the empty room, the emptiness echoing back his newfound understanding. Realizing that his father had chosen wealth over connection ignited an anger that coursed through him like wildfire. Jonathan's life, built on the hollow foundations of privilege, now felt tainted by the choices his father made. In that moment of clarity, he recognized that his own loneliness and longing for acceptance were not simply personal failings, but byproducts of a lineage rife with hidden truths and moral decay. Meanwhile, miles away, Alex wrestled with demons of his own. The ramifications of their confrontation circled in his mind, creating a storm of uncertainty. He had always felt like an outsider, relegated to the peripherals of Jonathan's world, and now, faced with the possibility of family, feelings of inadequacy crept in. Would the weight of Jonathan's wealth and power push them further apart, or could they bridge the chasm that had just widened? "What do I even mean to him?" Alex murmured to himself, sitting on the edge of his modest bed, staring at the reflection of a young man caught between two very different lives. His heart ached with the desire to be seen as an equal, a brother worthy of the name. But would that ever come to pass under the shadow of Jonathan's empire? Questions spiraled, clashing like storm clouds threatening to unleash their fury. Days transformed into restless nights filled with what-ifs. And then, unexpectedly, a chance encounter awaited. Jonathan found himself drawn back to their childhood home, a place steeped in faint recollections and long-forgotten joys. The old house sat silent beneath a canopy of trees, its paint peeling, but the memories lingered like faint echoes. As he stepped inside, the scent of aged wood and lingering warmth enveloped him, all at once familiar and foreign. He wandered through the living room, fingers trailing along the surface of dust-laden furniture, momentarily lost in the ghosts of their youth. The laughter that once rang brightly felt muted, overshadowed by the reality that had settled in his heart. It was then he heard the creak of a floorboard behind him and turned to find Alex standing in the doorway, eyes wide with an emotion he couldn't place it. The distance between them felt both insurmountable and strangely intimate, like the fragile threads of a tapestry that connected two lives now teetering on the brink. "Jonathan," Alex spoke, voice tentative, as if the air crackled with the potential of both hope and pain. "Alex," he replied, the weight of his brother's name hanging between them like a fragile Bridget. Memories flooded back. Childhood adventures, simple games that once felt limitless, but now lost behind a wall of complexity. As they exchanged glances, each heart lay bare, searching for something deeper amid the uncertainty. Would this moment, fraught with tension yet glimmering with the possibility of reconciliation, be enough to mend their fractured bond? The quietness was thick with emotion, yet an undercurrent of hope flowed beneath. In those shared memories, perhaps they could find common ground, but Jonathan knew the path ahead would be tumultuous. Questions lingered unanswered, casting shadows over their uncertain futures. Would they navigate the complexities of their entwined lives? Would they rise above the past, or would the weight of their heritage continue to pull them apart? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the brothers took tentative steps toward one another, their fates intertwined in ways they were just beginning to understand. Yet, the uncertainty loomed like the encroaching night, a reminder that their decisions moving forward would shape the very essence of their family ties. One they had only just begun to confront. The heavy air in the old family home felt weighted with memories as Jonathan and Alex stepped into the dimly lit living room, a space marked by dust and abandonment, yet resonating with the echoes of their shared past. Sunlight filtered through the faded curtains, casting long shadows across the floor, illuminating the remnants of a childhood both had long since left behind. This place, once filled with laughter and comfort, now bore the scars of time, a reflection of the brothers' own fractured histories. "Can you believe how much it's changed?" Jonathan mused, running his fingers along the edge of a cracked mantelpiece. His voice was a mixture of nostalgia and sorrow, each word steeped in the weight of their shared childhood. Images of their younger selves flashed in his mind, carefree days spent playing tag, racing through the halls, their innocent laughter filling the space with warmth. But those days felt like a distant dream, overshadowed by years of silence and unacknowledged pain. "Yeah, it's like everything has crumbled," Alex replied, glancing around. His eyes lingered on the remnants of old photographs scattered across the room, each one a ghost of a moment in time, their smiles bright and untouched by the burdens of adulthood. A soft sigh escaped Alex's lips as he crouched to pick one up. It depicted the two of them huddled together, grinning from ear to ear with their arms around each other, a snapshot of lost innocence. "We used to be so close," Jonathan said, his voice thickening with emotion. "What happened to us?" "Life happened, I guess," Alex responded quietly, the weight of regret hanging between them like a delicate thread. The vulnerability in both their eyes mirrored the pain of what they had lost. Not just their childhood, but the bond that had once tied them together. Jonathan felt the tightness in his chest expand as he opened up for the first time. "I built this whole life, you know, one filled with wealth and parties, but it's just empty. I thought success would fill the void, but it hasn't. It's like I've been living in a bubble where no one really knows me." The confession hung in the air, vulnerable and raw, revealing a Jonathan who had long concealed his inner turmoil behind the affluence that defined him. Alex studied him closely, seeing not just the millionaire, but the man struggling beneath the weight of his own choices. "I get that," he admitted softly. "I've worked so hard just to keep my head above water. Every day is a grind, and all I can think about is surviving. But then I look at you, And it's hard not to wonder if I should resent you for that life you have." His brow furrowed, a blend of envy and longing evident in his tone. A heavy silence engulfed them for a moment, each sensing the tension wound tightly in the fabric of their conversation. "But I don't want you to resent me," Jonathan replied, his heart aching at the thought. "I never asked for this disparity, and I never wanted you to feel like you were less than anything because of it. We're still brothers, whatever that means for us now." A flicker of understanding sparked in Alex's eyes, the depth of their shared history threading through the vulnerability and pain they both felt. "You know, I've always wanted to connect, to know my brother, to be part of something larger than my struggles." The admission felt like a delicate bridge forming between them, a bond resurrecting from the ashes of their childhood home. "I wish I could rewind time," Jonathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were supposed to grow up together, to share everything, not to be like this, standing separated by years of silence and unspoken words." Their emotions laid bare, the brothers tentatively stepped closer into each other's lives. It was a fragile moment, a poignant reckoning filled with the acknowledgement of hurt and betrayal they had both suffered. Yet a desire for connection began to rise, the longing for a brotherhood that remained buried beneath societal expectations and personal fears. But as they began to navigate the terrain of their evolving relationship, the sudden trill of Jonathan's phone shattered the fragile air. Glancing down, he felt a jolt of anxiety course through him, a familiar number flashing across the screen. It was his financial advisor, an ominous interruption threatening their moment of connection. "Excuse me," Jonathan murmured, fear swimming in his stomach as he answered the call, sensing the turning tide of their hard-won reunion. "Jonathan, we need to talk. There's something urgent. A potential financial issue that could impact the company's stability," his advisor said urgently, the words sending ripples of dread washing over Jonathan. The reality of his empire, once a gilded fortress, threatened to crack under scrutiny. "No!" Jonathan croaked, torn between the revelations shared with Alex and the impending crisis that could unravel everything they had just started to rebuild. "Unless you want to lose everything, yes," the advisor replied, an edge of urgency underscoring their conversation. With the weight of the call still pulsing in his hand, Jonathan's gaze drifted back to Alex, whose hopeful expression was now shrouded in uncertainty. The moment of reconnection had slipped away like sand through fingers, replaced with the ominous shadow of an impending storm. What darker secrets of their family's past lurked beneath the surface, waiting to complicate their fragile bond once again? As Jonathan ended the call, they both understood. This was only the beginning of their tangled fates intertwining, but could their nascent brotherhood survive the undeniable challenges ahead? The weight of impending disaster hung heavily in the air as Jonathan stared at the series of reports laid out before him. Figures danced across the pages, spelling out a story of decline he could hardly bear to acknowledge. He sat alone in the vast emptiness of his office, surrounded by opulence that suddenly felt suffocating, gleaming surfaces reflecting a future he had gradually come to realize was crumbling before his eyes. "Jonathan?" Alex's voice broke through the tension, carrying a blend of concern and determination. He stepped into the room, the simple fabric of his clothes contrasting sharply with the luxurious decor that surrounded them. Jonathan looked up, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and anxiety as he held the gaze of the only person who might have the insight he so desperately needed. Jonathan hesitated, the words knotting in his throat, caught between pride and desperation. "I need your help with that single admission. A shift happened." The once distant and informal dynamic began to morph into something deeper, almost desperate. Jonathan gestured for Alex to take a seat, his hand shaky on the polished conference table. "The company is on the verge of collapse. If this doesn't turn around, I might lose everything." Alex's eyebrows furrowed, understanding the gravity of the situation. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, sincerity washing over him, that unmistakable spark of street-smart determination igniting in his eyes. "I was hoping you could brainstorm ways we could save the business," Jonathan admitted, embarrassment creeping into his voice. "Your insights. I've seen how you handle things. You know how to think on your feet, navigate through chaos." They leaned over the documents together, Alex's fingers tracing the numbers that felt like daggers to Jonathan's self-worth. The young man's approach was refreshingly candid, a stark contrast to Jonathan's accustomed world of polished presentations and boardroom rhetoric. Have you considered focusing on community engagement? Alex's voice was steady, and Jonathan could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. People want to feel connected to what you represent, especially during tough times? A twinge of realization coursed through Jonathan. Alex, with his experience in the shadows of society, held a wealth of knowledge about what true connection meant. Jonathan had often overlooked that, buried in wealth, he now recognized, lay a burden that stifled his ability to relate to the very people who could support his empire. You might be right. Maybe we need to humanize the business again. To remind people that we care, he conceded reluctantly, feeling a shift in his understanding of what wealth could represent. As they charted out plans for integrating community support, conversations began to flow with an energy Jonathan had not anticipated. We could run local workshops, give back to schools, something that highlights our commitment, Alex suggested, his enthusiasm palpable. Workshops seem like a good place to start, Jonathan mused aloud, feeling a sense of camaraderie blooming between them, like a fragile flicker of hope before the approaching storm. They navigated through risk assessments and outlined action steps, and with every moment they collaborated, Jonathan felt the weight of his earlier prejudices about his brother begin to lift it. Yet, amid the discussions, further family secrets began to surface, creeping in during their shared reflection. As Alex recounted stories from his childhood, the echoes of their father's choices reverberated heavily between them. I always thought I was navigating life alone. Turns out I was just a shadow of a family that never wanted me, Alex said, vulnerability wrapping around his words. Jonathan's heart ached as he wrestled with what to say. I don't want us to be defined by our family's mistakes. Alex, I want us to create something new. His voice quivered with resolve, intertwining their fates with the hope that they could reshape their identities independently of the past. Creating something new sounds idealistic, Alex replied, his brow furrowing slightly as the weight of familial expectations laced his tone. I never thought about stepping fully into your life, Jonathan. It's one thing to be brothers, but it's another to carry the legacy with you. The conversation dwindled, each contemplating the complexities that lay ahead. Jonathan could sense the shifting balance of power, the struggle against external judgments that sought to divide them. In that moment, he grasped that Alex's journey toward acceptance would not only affect them, but redefine what it meant to be family amidst societal scrutiny. Just when the air grew thick with contemplation, the door swung open, revealing a figure from Jonathan's past, Mrs. Henderson, an old family friend whose presence seemed charged with both familiarity and unease. Her expression bore the marks of concern as she stepped across the threshold. I heard about your troubles, Jonathan. I thought it necessary to come by. A wave of nostalgia mixed with apprehension washed over Jonathan. He gestured for her to sit, but the moment she caught sight of Alex, her demeanor shifted. Ah, you must be Alexandra, she began, eyes narrowing, the name hanging in the air like an accusation steeped in long-held secrets. Alex, the young man interjected smoothly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Alex, Mrs. Henderson repeated, her tone tinted with a peculiar blend of curiosity and caution. I didn't anticipate you being here during these trying times. What is it that you know? Jonathan pressed, heart racing. He felt the weight of generations behind her words, poised on the brink of a revelation that could either draw them closer or rip their fragile bond apart again. The air grew electric with the promise of truths that may have lain dormant for too long, ready to reshape the very foundation upon which they had begun to rebuild their family ties. Just then, in that charged moment punctuated by her silence, Jonathan understood. They were on the precipice of something monumental, a moment that could redefine their brotherhood forever. The atmosphere in the old family home thickened with unresolved tension as Mrs. Henderson settled into the dimly lit armchair, her expression betraying layers of knowledge that weighed heavily on her. Jonathan and Alex exchanged wary glances, instinctively aware that the next words spoken might unravel all they had begun to rebuild. Jonathan, Alex, she began, her tone heavy with an ominous precision. "There are matters regarding your father that you both deserve to know." The words hung in the air like smoke, clinging to the walls, steeped in history. Jonathan's heart raced. The shadows of the past, lining his thoughts with an uneasy anticipation. "What are you talking about?" he pressed, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the storm brewing within. Mrs. Henderson inhaled deeply, her gaze particularly focused on Jonathan. "There was a scandal, years ago, about your father's dealings. It involved betrayals and decisions that I felt you both needed to understand, especially now." Distaste flickered across her features, invoking a whirlwind of memories long buried beneath the weight of silence. "Betrayals?" Alex echoed, his voice wavering slightly as he shifted uncomfortably. "What did he do?" Mrs. Henderson glanced at them both, a somber wisdom lighting her eyes. "Your father wasn't always the upstanding businessman you think of. He made choices that put his family's reputation in jeopardy. There was an affair. A betrayal that not only hurt your mother but another family altogether. It's a shadow that lingered over all of you for years." An icy silence enveloped the room. Jonathan's mind raced back through the fragments of his upbringing, the unspoken rifts in familial relationships. He felt the ground shift beneath him, the weight of a legacy he had been too naive to recognize. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he managed, wondering how much of that shame had been silently passed down to him. "Because we thought it was better this way," Mrs. Henderson replied, her voice tiny yet gutting, "to protect you both from the truths that could only bring pain. But now, standing here with your connection to each other, it feels imperative to confront the past." The chaos within Jonathan unfurled as anger flared. "So what? Now we just get to hold hands and sing Kumbaya. He betrayed us, and now I'm supposed to welcome you into my life, Alex? How can we even begin to trust each other with this legacy hanging over our heads?" "Jonathan," Alex interjected, hurt flooding his tone, "this isn't about you pushing me away. I know what this means for our family, and you know I've been struggling with the idea of wealth itself. I didn't grow up like you did. I watched my mother toil just to provide. Is this supposed to be a gift or a chain?" The accusation struck hard. Jonathan's chest tightened as he considered his brother's view. "You think I wanted this weight? You don't know the sacrifices it took to get here." He shot back, frustration boiling. "I can't just wish it all away." "Pretend that your wishes matter more than this legacy." As their voices rose, the tension in the room lapped against them like the waves of an approaching storm. Both felt the friction of differing philosophies, one of responsibility and privilege clashing with resentment and longing for belonging. "Maybe this legacy needs to change," Alex shouted, passion igniting in his eyes. "We should recognize the wrongs, not perpetuate them. If we're family, let's reforge our bonds and create a mission together. Use this wealth for social good." "Social good?" Jonathan scoffed, struggling to see the connection between their family's inheritance and altruism. "You think we can just turn our backs on all we've worked for?" "Yes," Alex exclaimed, his voice steady with conviction. "What if we redefine what family means beyond just lineage? What if we become something the world can respect instead of hide from?" For a heartbeat, silence fell between them, their breaths mingling in the stillness as the depth of Alex's words sank in. Somewhere beneath Jonathan's conflict, a flicker of hope illuminated, intertwining with the possibility of forging a new path driven by shared purpose. "All right then," he conceded, his voice softer, humbled. "Let's embrace it. Not as mere brothers bonded by blood, but as partners who can shift this legacy." Mrs. Henderson observed their exchange, the corners of her mouth curling in a hint of approval. It was an affirmation that the two could navigate the treacherous waters ahead, together. But as they began to articulate their shared mission, a vision of charity that would redirect the family fortune towards social causes, an uneasy feeling nagged at Jonathan's consciousness. He couldn't shake the sensation that some dark tempest lay ahead, lurking just beyond their perspective, threatening to inundate their newfound efforts with turmoil. A sudden thunderclap rent the air outside, powerful enough to make the walls tremble, mirroring the storm brewing in Jonathan's heart. Just as conflict faltered, they received a jarring text on Jonathan's phone, a headline that could unravel everything they had just begun to weave into their tapestry of brotherhood. Your father's business dealings are under investigation, it read ominously. Leaks from inside sources are hinting at deeper connections to corruption. His breath caught in his throat, and a chill swept through him. Jonathan felt his mind race, flooding with dread, and the realization that the world around them was about to collide with the fragile bond they had worked so hard to rebuild. "Jonathan?" Alex whispered, sensing the shift in dynamic. "What's wrong?" A lump formed in Jonathan's throat as he looked at his brother, the weight of uncertainty swimming in their gaze. "I think we're about to face something much bigger than ourselves," he managed, his heart pounding against the noise of impending chaos. The room, filled with both hope and determination, suddenly felt like the calm before a storm, one that could very well rip through their newfound mission and lay bare the complexities of their connection and trust. The storm they had so carefully begun to navigate was suddenly turned inside out. News broke like a dam bursting, sending shockwaves through Jonathan's business empire. An investigation had commenced, and the implications loomed like dark clouds over their heads. Headlines flashed across screens, journalists laying bare the alleged corruption that ran through the very veins of their family legacy. Each article dripped with sensationalism, twisting the narrative into one of scandal and intrigue, punctuated by statements that painted Jonathan and Alex as mere pawns in a game of greed. In the wake of the chaos, Jonathan felt a familiar isolation surge back to the surface. It pulsed through him with every passing glance from journalists camped outside his mansion, each face a reminder of his growing disconnection from the world. "They don't understand us," Jonathan muttered one afternoon, pacing aggressively around the opulent, yet now suffocating confines of the family home. "They don't even know what we're trying to do." "Exactly, which is why we need to be transparent," Alex countered, frustration knitting his brow. They stood in the spacious, yet claustrophobically airy living room, the sunlight streaming through the massive windows, now tainted by the shadows of their mounting challenges. "Hiding won't solve anything, Jonathan. It'll only make it worse." Jonathan met Alex's gaze, caught between rage and hurt. "You think I want to have my life plastered across those papers?" "I'm trying to protect us both," he shot back, emotion creeping into his voice, flashing through the cracks in his composure. "What has this world ever done for us except betray us? I want to fight back, not expose ourselves to more accusations." And there it was again, the feeling of isolation inching closer, clawing at him with each word exchanged. Memories of silent dinners and empty rooms flashed through his mind, the burdens of their shared upbringing amplifying the divide forming between the brothers. Even after days and nights filled with conversations that knitted together a semblance of unity, now, faced with actual adversity, Jonathan found himself retreating into old habits, hesitant to lean on the very person who had, only moments ago, stood steadfast beside him. "Jonathan, we can't keep running," Alex implored, voice steady yet laced with an urgency that set Jonathan's teeth on edge. "All this time, we've talked about being different, about embracing a new legacy. This is our chance to show that change starts with us. Rebuilding trust has to mean owning our mistakes and confronting the truth. It's the only way forward. Why do you keep pushing me to confront everything?" Jonathan barked, feeling Mars collide with his resolve, shadows from his past looming like ghosts, ready to haunt him again. "If we expose ourselves like that, what happens to everything I've built? I thought you wanted to embrace what we could become together." Alex's voice rose, the frustration spilling over into an unmistakable depth of hurt. "Do you really think we can have a future if you're still shackled to the past? I can't pretend I'm okay with that." Jonathan took a step back, hurt seeping into the spaces between them. "You don't know what it's like to carry this weight, Alex," he said, his tone softening, but brewing anger still danced in his eyes. "To have everything scrutinized. What happens when all this blows up in our faces? Will you still support the choices I've made?" "No, Jonathan, it's not about that," Alex replied, taking a deep breath, forcing calm over the tension in the room. "It's about recognizing what's real. You can't keep running from the consequences of your choices, and I can't stand by while you do." They stood inches apart, a sliver of air heavy with contention. Jonathan felt a familiar sense of loss wash over him. The very thing he feared losing was already slipping through his fingers. A knotted mix of emotions flooded his heart. the desire to fight against the encroaching chaos, the desperate longing to withstand the storm together, and the fearful realization that vulnerability might be the only path to genuine transformation. It was in that fragile moment of self-doubt that something within him began to shift it. Clarity pierced through the chaos, snapping him awake like a bolt of lightning illuminating the night sky. "All right," he said. "I'll face this. I'll face it with you." Alex's gaze softened, the tension easing just slightly. "We'll do it together," he reassured, the intensity of their earlier arguments fading. "But it has to be genuine. We need to be authentic about our pasts. No more hiding." The two brothers stood united now, a bond forged in the fire of discord, but reflected in their shared commitment to honesty. As the world outside continued to churn with demands for answers, Jonathan felt the flicker of hope ignite anew. "I'll gather the information and face the board," he resolved quietly. "But it won't just be about defending my reputation. It will be about redefining who we are, what it means to face our past, but still stand for our future. It's time we show them that our family isn't just a shadow of what used to be. It's evolving." With newfound determination, they began formulating plans together, a united front against the tempest brewing on the horizon. No longer would they be merely brothers bound by blood. They would redefine the essence of their family against the tide of adversity, standing together as they confronted the world. And in that pivotal moment, they chose not only to challenge the storm that sought to tear them down, but to reshape their identities into something stronger, grounded in authenticity, and rooted in respect for one another. The air felt charged with possibility, as both brothers took their first step toward confronting the allegations. Together, no longer just separated by their pasts, but united in determination, ready to weather whatever storm lay ahead. The storm clouds of media scrutiny loomed heavily over Jonathan and Alex as they stepped into the press conference, a strange pulse radiating through the air, the charged energy of conflict mingling with anticipation. The bright lights flashed like falling stars, illuminating their every move, and the weight of their family's legacy hung thick around them. The atmosphere was tense, filled with reporters eager to dig into the drama that had unfolded. "Together we stand united," Jonathan's voice boomed, steadying the tremor that threatened to invade his confidence. He glanced at Alex, and for a moment, barriers built over years of pain slipped away, replaced by an unexpected sense of solidarity. As questions flew like arrows from a crowd of reporters, Jonathan answered each with deliberate poise. "This is not just about our missteps or an empire built upon secrets. It's about accountability. Our father's choices are ours to acknowledge, but so too is our commitment to forge a life that reflects who we want to be." Beside him, Alex felt the surge of pride pull at his chest, the truth of the words resonating deep within him. Together, they were no longer just brothers, navigating familial wounds. They were partners battling for their narrative, their truth spanning across the gulf of expectation and social judgment. When the conference concluded, the brothers retreated to the sanctuary of Jonathan's office, the room now feeling less like a luxurious fortress and more like a space where transformation could take place. But still, tension buzzed in the air, thick with uncertainty as they faced the truly unexpected discovery that awaited them. "Jonathan," Alex began, his voice barely above a whisper as he nervously unfolded a document he had found hidden among the old family letters. "There's something significant I need to share." The tremor in his voice caught Jonathan's full attention. "What is it?" His heart raced for a moment, a flutter of trepidation as Alex laid the paper on the polished desk. The words written upon it were profound, a testament to their intertwined legacies that echoed through the very roots of their relationship. "It says I'm entitled to a portion of the family wealth," Alex revealed, disbelief shimmering in his eyes. "Not just as a brother in name, but as an heir. This belonged to my mother, just as much as it did to yours." The revelation struck Jonathan like a lightning bolt. This new twist offered opportunities he hadn't anticipated, a chance to redefine not only their relationship, but also their paths forward. Yet, an unsettling fear crept into his thoughts. How can we trust each other now? Will this change everything between us? "I didn't ask for this," Alex replied, the weight of the document hanging heavily in the air. "But I want us to pursue something greater. What if we dedicate these resources to charity, use it to help those who have lived in the shadows of our light?" A moment passed, filled with a blend of excitement and hesitation. Jonathan's internal conflict unraveled in front of him. They both stood at a crossroads, demanding courage and willingness. "Are you sure you want to do this? This could reshuffle everything, complicating what we're building," Jonathan murmured, apprehension clawing at his heart. "I realize that," Alex said, his conviction unwavering. "I'm willing to accept this inheritance, but on one condition. It's not about power or wealth. It's about using what we have for good." Jonathan met Alex's gaze, sensing the sincerity behind the words. It dawned on him that this was the transformation he so desperately needed. Family would be something they defined together. It was not just about bound blood or history, but rather compassion and purpose. "I am in," he said finally, his voice steadying as he felt the stirrings of a new legacy rising within him. "Together we'll reclaim this family's narrative and reforge it into something meaningful." In the ensuing weeks, as they poured their efforts into charitable pursuits, funding community projects, educating underprivileged children, and making connections within the neighborhoods they had previously overlooked, a palpable change rippled through both their lives. They regularly visited the centers they supported, witnessing firsthand the impact of their decisions. During these moments, they discovered a bond forged not just in familial duty, but in shared passion and dedication. They became allies in a mission that aligned with their newfound values, a commitment to compassion over greed. With every smile shared and every life touched, the brothers blossomed together, reimagining the concept of family, understanding that their connection transcended blood ties. On the day of their first charity event, they stood peering through the crowd, exhilaration coursing through their veins as an electric energy sparked within their hearts. "Never in my life did I think I would find purpose beyond wealth," Jonathan said, gratitude welling in his voice as he turned to Alex. "It's beautiful, right?" Alex replied, a smile lighting up his features. "Today is just the beginning." As they took to the stage, the applause enveloped them like a warm embrace, the threads of their past weaving seamlessly into a shared vision for the future. They were creating a new narrative, one rooted in empathy and understanding, an embodiment of the family they had always desired but never fully understood. In the final moments of the event, Jonathan embraced the idea of family beyond blood. The transformation he had undergone resonated within him, and he felt ready to move forward. "Together, we're not just redefining our family's legacy," he addressed the crowd, his voice quaking with vulnerability and triumph. "We're cultivating a world where compassion reigns supreme." As the applause faded, Jonathan and Alex stepped off the stage, hearts intertwined with a purpose that would guide them through the challenges ahead. They left the event, walking side by side through the throngs of people, renewed hope pulsing between them. And as they strode away from the shadows of their past, their strides steady and sure, the camera pulled back, capturing the brothers embarking on a newfound journey. Together, they no longer battled alone, but embraced the complexities of family and connection, ready to face the dawn of a transformed legacy. The transformative journey they had encountered captured the essence of wealth, family, and priorities, reflecting a moral that lingered long after they exited the frame. It invited viewers to ponder the nuances of their own relationships, grounding them in the understanding that in the tapestry of life, the threads of compassion and kinship often shone the brightest. As the screen faded to black, the lingering question echoed in the minds of the audience. What new principles will guide us moving forward? Will compassion triumph over greed,